I was so uncomfortable. Let's just go home. So I went home, not liking my trip to UPenn, but I didn't like my trip to Cornell worse. So I ended up choosing UPenn because it was the best of the worst options, because I had already narrowed down my choices to that. So that's where I ended up being. Looking back, I mean, the Lord was using it, all of it, to bring me to that place where all of my plans were just going to get destroyed, which I'm really thankful for now. My parents pretty much had me in church from the time that I was born, really. My grandfather was a pastor of the first church that I attended. And he was an amazing evangelist. So I heard the gospel from the time that I was a child. But it probably wasn't until I was in 4th grade that I took any of that serious. But I do remember very distinctly, even as a 4th grader, I would have been 9 or 10 years old, after a showing of The Cross and the Switchblade. The David Wilkerson movie. The scene where the guy fell from the balcony. For some reason, just the reality of death and of hell and of where I was going if I didn't receive Jesus, and all of the reality that really struck me, even as a young child, really. And I remember after that evening service, it was a Sunday evening service, going home and asking my mom and dad if I could be saved. And I remember them praying with me and accepting Christ as a 4th grader. Now, obviously, I didn't walk with Jesus real close all the time through high school. I mean, I didn't get off into a lot of bad things, but I was more self-focused. I think through junior high and into high school, I really ended up pursuing my own goals, my own dreams for my life. Certain things that I, wanted out of life that I thought were going to satisfy me, things that I thought were going to what life I felt was made of, success in regards to sports, especially wrestling, which I was involved in, academics, working hard. I ended up pursuing all of that, basically on my own, not asking the Lord's direction for my life, but just assuming that this is what you did. I'm a Christian, I'm okay in that area, but now I have to take care of all these other things, and I just, basically ran my own life. Going into the process of choosing a college, I ended up basically narrowing it down to University of Pennsylvania and Cornell. Those were both top 25 Division I wrestling programs in the country. Those were places with a good reputation, and the coaches were great, and the setups there, just were really good. So I ended up narrowing it down to UPenn and Cornell. At first I made this list, and I put Penn on one side and Cornell on the other side, and I pros and conned it, and I did the whole thing. And when I was all done with that, it was really very balanced. So I didn't have like an overwhelming. That didn't work. So then I just figured I'd just take my official recruiting trips to these different places and hope that I knew where I was going to go. But then on these recruiting trips, they get a little bit of money and they give it to your chaperone for the weekend, and they say, just show these guys a good time, just treat them, and take them out. And it's ridiculous. I went to the University of Pennsylvania on my recruiting trip. Most of the weekend was spent in a frat house turning down beer. It's just a waste of time, really. Very, very uncomfortable with the trip. Very uncomfortable just with the atmosphere there. There were some really great guys on the team, but by and large, I didn't enjoy, my experience there on that recruiting trip. So I told my parents I don't want to go to UPenn. So Cornell is where I wanted to go. So my dad and I went on a trip to Cornell, and we sat down with the head coach and the assistant coach at that time, and I had one of the absolute worst conversations I've ever had with an adult. So I went home, not liking my trip to UPenn, but I didn't like my trip to Cornell worse. So I ended up choosing UPenn because it was the best of the worst options, because I had already narrowed down my choices to that. So that's where I ended up being. Looking back, it was all frustration because I wasn't supposed to be at either of them, but I had narrowed it down so fast that that's where I thought I should be. During my sophomore year at Penn, the Lord met me. It took me through a series of probably 6 months or so at the University of Pennsylvania of just sheer loneliness, just the sense of failure and frustration. Everything that I was trying to pursue, everything that I wanted, that I thought was important, the Lord just one at a time just took them away. And so after 6 months of just frustration and loneliness and fear and, getting to the point in time where I thought, I'll pack my car up from school and then just drive somewhere, not caring if I ever come back, not caring what anybody thought, if I dropped out or if I died, I didn't even really care, because I didn't think I even wanted to be, kind of in that existence. I didn't even want to try to keep going. But it was in that process of really kind of being broken down that the Lord made himself real to me. And it was in a little efficiency apartment on 42nd or 43rd Street in West Philadelphia, that while I was dealing with all of the loneliness and fear, I had a pastor. He gave me a through the Bible reading plan. And it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. I had tried to read through the Bible on my own as a kid. I remember a couple times as a kid trying to read through the Bible and not getting past Genesis. This plan had you reading from about 2 or 3 different or 4 different places, at the Bible at the same time, and I think I was at the place in my life where I knew I needed to do this. So almost like out of just sheer determination, just started reading through the Bible and working through this plan. Well, it was 6 months of reading the Bible, and it was rather dry, because I hadn't come into that relationship with the Lord yet that makes it come alive. And it was in Ezekiel chapter 2. I remember where we were. It was in Ezekiel chapter 2, and that passage has been instrumental in my life even since. That the Lord would call a man to eat his word in such a way that it could be a part of his life and then be poured out to the people around him. That ends up becoming, in some ways, my calling. But it was that passage where the Lord used in my life to open up my relationship with him, years before I was called to any type of ministry. It's just interesting how it works together in God's plan, So, the scriptures were always a part of our lives. As a kid, I'd carry the Bible to church. But they didn't come alive to me until I was willing to really surrender my life. And then when they did, they've never gone back. They're still alive. So it's one of the reasons why I want to encourage others. So much. Just keep trying. Just keep going in this. And when you're ready and willing to hear what God wants to say to you, this whole thing will take on a new life, and you'll just be totally blown away. The other thing that struck me in that encounter with the Lord at Penn was that he was just so real. It was like he was in the room. And he asked me a couple of questions that I didn't want to answer. One of them being, why are you here? And I realized that I would have to answer that question in my own self-will. I wasn't there because God directed me to be there. I was there because I wanted to be there. And I think that was really the start of being called to ministry. That was really the start of me surrendering my life to his ultimate plan for me. So I ended up having to take a year off from school When I was done at UPenn, I was just going to get into another school quick and finish out my education. I was just so fed up. I was just going to do anything. So I applied to every local school in this area, Bloomsburg and SU, and everybody that would take me, just get in and finish it. And just one after another, God just kept closing doors. During that year off from school, I ended up meeting Julie through some blind date, weird situation, circumstances. I ended up meeting her when she was attending Messiah College, which is where I knew the Lord, eventually it's where the Lord directed me to go and finish out my college education. So if I would have stayed at UPenn, I don't know if I wouldn't have met her maybe, or it would have been a completely different, of course, she wouldn't have wanted to meet me then. I would have been very frustrating to her during that time. So we met when we should have met. We met when I was the person that she needed to meet. I wasn't ready for that blessing then because I was too self-focused and too selfish. I would have ruined it. That time at the University of Pennsylvania was formative. I wouldn't be here today doing what I do now, probably in any way, not just as a pastor, but as a husband, as a father, or any of this. I wouldn't do it without that experience. Before that, I didn't understand that I was living in a relationship with God. It was more of just trying to do things for God or to act like a Christian, but it wasn't relating with Him or doing it with Him. And so as a result of that, before that experience at UPenn, my Christian experience was this roller coaster. It was always up, always down, it was never consistent, never steady. I couldn't even say really that I was growing. It was more of a religious experience for me then. I believed that I was saved, and I believed that I was saved the way we're all saved, by the grace of God, that my salvation had nothing to do with my experience. But I believe at the University of Pennsylvania, that understanding of where I stood with the Lord is the experience that allows me to live out now what was the reality of God that He placed in me when I was in 4th grade. That as a byproduct of yielding to the Lord and really walking closely with Him through the ministry of the Holy Spirit, that I was able to be who I always knew I should have been. That I never could actually reach that potential on my own because it was all in self-strength before. Now I just walk with God and it just happens. It's just a byproduct of the fruit of fellowship, really. So that's been really my understanding from then on.